You're listening to the Crystal Clear Kidneys podcast with Dr. Paul Dreyer.
Is a compound that's found in a lot of very healthy foods.
It's interesting because, we had a guest on the show recently. And I think she actually went to your YouTube site, Melody. I think I'm
What's CKD? Sorry.
Chronic kidney disease.
Okay.
So, yeah, patients that don't have normal kidney function. Well, sorry. You keep us honest. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And
that's kind of my story, why I do what I do.
welcome, listeners, to the Kidney Stone Prevention podcast with Dr. Paul Dreyer. And of course, it is actually called the Crystal Clear Kidney podcast with Dr. Paul Dreyer. So, Dr. Paul, so good to see you again.
Yeah, Will, good to see you as well.
As I always say, the doctor will see you now. We've got a special episode here. We have Melanie Betts, known as the dietitian, a registered dietitian specializing in kidney stone prevention. So the kidney dietitian, which Melanie is known to be, is helping to change the conversation about kidney stones to make thousands of people make better food choices for stone prevention. So she's a leader. She regularly speaks at national and state conferences. She's on the board of multiple organizations, including the Renal Practice Group, National Kidney Foundation, National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, and the American Kidney Foundation. So, man, we got two heavyweights on the Crystal Clear podcast today. So, Melanie, thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, I want to extend that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So what we forget, a couple of words describing. What else can you say that I missed, or did I hit it all?
I think you hit the high points. I've found myself kind of dedicating my career to kidney stone prevention. Yeah, I think the first question that we were going to address was,
you hit it.
What is a good segue. What started, why kidney stones, right? Like why have I sort of truly dedicated my career to them? And it started back at the University of Chicago. I took a random job there, knew basically nothing about kidneys, but had taken a step back from academic medicine, but missed it and felt like it was a good opportunity. So I worked at in the section of nephrology at the University of Chicago for about 5.5 years. And many of you may know that the University of Chicago is pretty well known for their stone prevention program. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I was like, wow, I knew nothing about kidney stones before this. Because it's just not part of dietitian training. Like we're required to learn about, diabetes and heart disease and blah, blah, blah. But like kidney stones are just not part of it. Like, this is insane how important nutrition is. And we don't know anything about it. So I just kind of honestly fell into it. I was very fortunate to work with some amazing nephrologists. And I was like, this is fascinating. And so I started the kidney dietitian as sort of a side hustle. It was actually my COVID project. It went live in April of 2020, almost as this ethical response to the really terrible information that people were reading online, both for kidney disease and kidney stones, honestly. Like, it was just heartbreaking to have people come to me and feel like they couldn't eat anything, which is completely not true, right? Like, they're just reading such terrible advice online. I was like, I've got to do something about it. So I started the kidney dietitian as a way to educate the world about science-based kidney nutrition in general, but I've niched even farther into kidney stones. So that's kind of my story and why I do what I do.
Well, that is excellent. So both Dr. Paul and and Melanie have mentioned, right, especially if you've been watching Dr. Paul's Crystal Clear Kidneys podcast, about how advice, Melanie was just saying that, how advice about kidney stones, you get information online, even from some sources, even from some doctors, can be outdated and incorrect. So if Dr. Paul and Melanie, could you give us real quick some common misconceptions about what you're hearing out there that about kidney stone diets and how you guys are a little different than your average GP or urologist or anybody else out there too, right? The internet is full of information. Some of it's correct, some of it isn't. So we've got the two, heavyweights here, the two subject matter experts. So if you guys could discuss some common misconceptions out there and what sets you apart, that'd be great.
I'll let you go first, Dr. Paul. I'll fill in this.
Oh,
No, yeah, right. Um, it's interesting because, we had a guest on the show recently. Um, and I think she actually went to your YouTube site, Melody.
Oh,
I think I'm going, and we didn't bring this up actually on that podcast, but so I saw her, and um, her risk for stones was just she had low urine citrate, and the urologist had told her, and she's like, she's a very healthy eater, so she eats a lot of greens and that sort. And so she was on this low oxalate diet, and her urinary oxalate was like 19 milligrams or
fine.
something. I mean, like, you don't need to restrict the oxalate in your diet. That's not why you're making stones. So I put her on potassium citrate, and her urinary citrate normalized. And I said, "You won't make any more stones, I don't think, now that we've
Hmm.
corrected that." So she was kind of blown away that, she got sort of a bum steer. And that's you probably see that a whole lot more than I do, where people get bad dietary advice where it's like they're oxalate restricting, and it's like, that's not there's more than one reason that people make stones, and that's not your reason. So by restricting your oxalate, it's not going to improve your stone risk, but it's going to
Yeah.
certainly make your life more challenging to get a rounded diet.
It's gonna make
So
your diet overall less healthy, I would argue.
yes.
Yeah. My blood pressure actually went up a little bit because low oxalate diets is something that I am not a big fan of. And I find, to your point, that's all that people are ever told about, right? You Google it, that's all Google tells you. Unfortunately, that's what the handouts say when the emergency room, that's what urologists will do without ever getting a 24-hour urine test. So we don't even know if high urine calcium or high urine oxalate, excuse me, is what's forming your stones. Um, and I have a lot of content around how a low oxalate diet, truly, there's no data to show that a low oxalate diet prevents stones for anyone, for that record. And I truly think that a low oxalate diet that restricts whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, all of these healthy foods is lacking in a lot of things that we know are good for stone prevention, right? Things like alkali and phytate and magnesium and all of these things that are really, really good for stones. I think that's why in these huge studies we see less stones in people who follow, say, a Mediterranean or DASH style diet. So anyway, all that to be said, I think the low oxalate diet misconception is definitely something that I see most often and that I find I have to re-educate people. I think we, cannot talk about oxalate without the importance of calcium, right? Like, I'm not saying
Folks,
that.
just for everybody listening here, could you tell us what oxalate diet is for those of
Oh,
us who don't know?
sure. So, yeah. So, oxalate is a compound that's found in a lot of very healthy foods. It's found exclusively in plant foods. It's found like the heaviest hitters are often spinach, almonds, rhubarb, um, Swiss chard. So it's found in some healthy plant foods, and
Sounds
most
like you'd
stones are
find
made
it
of
in a
oxalate.
shake at the Fruitful Yield or something like that. That's
Yes,
like,
yes, yeah.
my
So like a
God.
spinach smoothie, I do see people get into trouble when you take like super high doses of oxalate, right? When people are doing like spinach salads for lunch and spinach smoothies. So like that, especially in the context of not getting in enough calcium, which is going to help reduce the intestinal absorption of that oxalate, then we definitely do see people getting into trouble. But I think we've sort of taken that to say, oh, everyone has calcium oxalate stones, which is not true. Most are, but even if you do, oxalate may not be what's forming those stones. And we've taken this message and it's gone wild into this low oxalate diet of trying to limit oxalate to say like 50 or 100 milligrams per day, which is
Is that a
impossible
lot?
to do. What? It's not much. Like a
Not much,
50,
huh?
it's not
What?
much. And it makes it really hard for people to eat a healthy diet, right?
Yeah.
Like people feel that they can't eat whole grains because you truly can on a low oxalate diet, which are good for stone prevention. It makes it really hard to get in enough fruits and vegetables, which Americans are not eating very much of to begin with. And
Right.
so it's so a low oxalate diet is going to restrict all whole grains, most vegetables,
Oof.
and some fruits. Um, and again, there's really no data to show that it's going to reduce your risk of stones. Dr. Paul, I don't know the approach you take, but I find that when people have high urine oxalate, 9 times out of 10, if we just simply get in enough calcium, that urine oxalate comes down and they're completely fine, right? Except in an extreme situation, maybe someone that has gastric bypass surgery, but then it's not diet that's the issue. Right, that's the whole nother like special
Right.
situation, but for most
Yeah.
people, your average stone former, you get enough calcium and oxalate is not a concern.
Yes, agreed. I mean, so you're right. Either the gastric bypass people or people with genetic disorders, primary hyperoxaluria, or some derivative. Those I typically do because the first patient we had on, we've had two patients on, Melanie, and my first patient, that was his etiology of Stone's. He was eating smoothies with high oxalate content,
Hmm.
so his urinary oxalate was 67. I said, if you chill on that, so he
Yeah.
did change. He was doing smoothies. He just wasn't putting oxalate stuff in there, and it came down to
Hmm.
like 28.
Yeah.
With just that simple intervention.
Yep.
And he goes, nobody ever told me this before. It was like it was revelation to him.
Yeah.
So, and again, so there, people are always thinking about all these other things. And sometimes it is just one issue that if you
Hmm.
straighten that out, then they're golden.
Right. Absolutely. And I've seen that, I feel like it's too much of a good thing because spinach is obviously good for you, right? But it's when people are eating a ton of it outside of that context of a healthy, well-balanced, varied diet with enough calcium, that's when people get into trouble.
So I have a three-part question for you because
Okay.
you brought up a fascinating point. Question one, what are dietary sources of phytate?
Mm,
Two, has intake of phytate shown to decrease stone incidence? And
hmm.
then three, has phytate intake shown to reduce arterial calcification?
Oh,
So,
um,
and I don't know. So I'm throwing those out there. I don't know what if and what you would know about any of
yeah.
that, but
Those are great, great questions. So, first one, okay, first one is dietary sources of phytate. It's most in whole grains and also beans, nuts, and seeds. So exactly the foods that we're telling people to not eat on a low oxalate diet. And also for the listeners out there, phytate is a compound that's found in those foods that I just mentioned. It's most known, if you Google it, actually as this demon thing that we should be avoiding because it's an anti-nutrient and it inhibits the absorption of some nutrients, which is not true. Phytate is not bad. It might slightly reduce the absorption of some things, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to impact your nutritional status of any of those things. So it's in all these healthy foods. And the reason that we care about it from a stone prevention is because it can bind with calcium and make calcium unable to bind with things like oxalate or phosphate and form stones. And there's really like in petri dish studies, they find that this phytate is actually like 10 times more effective at stopping stone prevention than citrate. So it's really a pretty big deal. And that's why we care about it. So, Dr. Paul, to answer your
Wow.
question, are there studies that show that um, phytate intake reduces stone risk? Not directly, because it's really hard to know how much phytate is in a food. Like it's very difficult to quantify. We don't have good food composition tables. So there's not a paper out there that shows like, hey, like eat more phytate, it reduces stones. However, as I'm sure you know, there's studies that show that eating more whole grains, eating more beans, eating more nuts, aka a DASH diet, Mediterranean diet. And there's a paper that came out, Rodriguez et al. In 2020, I think is the date, that looked at the specific components of a Mediterranean diet. And consistently, you see this in many papers. This is just one that I was looking at most recently. Whole grains specifically are consistently associated with a lower risk of stones, despite having a fair amount of oxalate in them. And I would argue phytate probably has a lot to do with it, as well as magnesium, because, and potassium, like all of those things all come together. So yeah,
I'm
so not
confused.
directly, but I really think, sorry, I'm trying not to get too sciencey. I really
No,
think,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
Now it
yeah,
sounds like a sexy diet, but oh, it's heavily in oxalate. But no, it doesn't cause stones. But in some people,
right.
it does. So it's like, wow.
Well, I think the key is, like I said before, the key is not a low oxalate diet. The key is just to eat a healthy, well-balanced, varied diet, right? Like if you're eating a variety of foods, even if you are eating some higher oxalate ones, you're going to eat other lower oxalate ones to offset them, and it just all kind of comes out in the wash. And if you're making sure you're getting in that calcium, then you're not going to be absorbing a lot of that oxalate anyway, and you'll be fine. So yeah, hopefully that kind of simplifies it a little bit.
Yeah, well, no, and you're right, Melanie, because some patients either it's their own notion or they've been given bad advice, but
Mhm.
they're told to have a low calcium diet,
Oh,
which actually
that's my
increases their risk for stones.
that's
And
my myth number
so
two. I wanted
that's
to
the
talk
first thing
about.
that I correct on them. And if they are, like you said, and if they're not lactose intolerant, I just tell them if you've got excess oxalate in the urine, then just take dairy with each meal. whatever it is, Greek yogurt or,
Milk,
whatever you wanted
cheese.
to.
Who
Yeah,
doesn't like cheese?
cheese. Yes, right. So
That's
put cheese on
great.
everything. So that's the sort of stuff. Yeah, you guide them toward.
Yeah. Yeah, the low
But
calcium thing is it's infuriating to me that that still is given, that advice is given to patients. Like that has been debunked for decades from my
yeah,
understanding.
1992. I
And
remember the
it's
article came out
oh
on that
yeah.
old.
And it's harmful. Like it's truly harming people. Not to mention bone health, right? Like calcium stone formers are at high risk of osteopenia, bone disease. We should not be limiting calcium on so many facets.
Well, and here's the other one that I see are patients with osteoporosis. They get put on vitamin D supplementation, these high crazy doses,
Mm-hmm.
and then also sometimes, if not most of the time, calcium
Calcium.
supplementation. And what I think is going on with them, because they'll get their DEXA scan and their bone density hasn't gone up one iota.
Hmm.
But I said, you're dumping all that calcium in your urinary system to make a stone. I think that you're going to have to figure out a different way to manage your osteoporosis because
Yeah.
this hasn't been effective and it's given you a side effect of making stones. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've seen that quite a
Yeah.
bit lately with
I
because more
have.
people are taking vitamin D because of COVID. And so
Mhm.
I've seen that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I think I get a lot of questions on social media, like, is it safe to take vitamin D? And I say, like, if you have low levels of vitamin D, sure, like take 2,000 IUs. That's not what I'm afraid of. It's those people that are left on like 50,000 IUs forever, right? Because like they get it checked once and their doctor puts them on vitamin D and they never follow up, and they just take it forever. That's when I see problems. And to your point, especially when people take calcium supplements, along with that, I think it's definitely exacerbated.
Have you worked with dialysis population at all, or are you strictly
No,
stone
I've
dietitian?
actually I worked with CKD, but I've never worked in dialysis.
What's
So
CKD? Sorry.
chronic kidney disease. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, patients that don't have normal kidney function. Well, sorry. You keep us honest. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And Melanie and Dr. Paul, how do you envision the future of kidney stone nutrition and prevention, right? What advancements are you guys excited about? Anything new coming up? Anything, or how do you envision kidney stone prevention and nutrition?
you want to go, Melanie?
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
Um, I I am excited about two things, I think. One, I personally am fascinated by the gut microbiome. And I think all of the research that's going on with how that impacts stone formers, like we definitely know that it plays a role,
And the
but
gut
exactly.
microbiome is,
Yes.
what
So
is
those
it?
healthy gut, those healthy bacteria that live in your intestines that
Okay.
impact basically all aspects of our health. And we're understanding more and more about how that impacts stone formers, which is another reason we don't want low oxalate diets, because when we go on a low oxalate diet, we're not getting fiber, which means we are not doing anything to help support those healthy bacteria down there. So side note, but I just think there's a lot of really interesting things. That a lot of really interesting studies that are going on. So that's one sort of facet of prevention that I'm really interested to see where that lands. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is the genetic components, right? Like we've identified, oh gosh, correct me if I'm wrong, but like something like 45 genes or so that like have some role to play in stone formation, right? So whether that gene leads to you having higher levels of calcium in your urine or lower levels of citrate or whatever it is, I think as we get sort of even more pinpointed and targeted in our prevention, we can come up with really exciting medications and treatments that really get to sort of the root cause, if you will, of why you're forming stones. So yeah, so those are the two things that come to my mind that I'm most excited about.
Interesting. Well, I know, can you share specific, are there studies that, because I know people have tried giving, there's a certain bacteria, Oxalobacter formigenes, that people have tried to use. And what I always worry when patients are taking, if they're taking probiotics, it's like, do you have a live culture? Is all that stuff dead? Is it really
Yes.
working? And so that's always the tough stuff to
Yep.
know if they're getting a quality product.
Yes.
So if you can share like where what a good source would be for probiotics and
Yeah.
And
So that's where we need more research, I think. So we know that, stone formers have a different community of bacteria. They have less or Oxalobacter formigenes, for example, than people who don't form stones. But the question about what we can do with that is still up for grabs, right? Like the trials that have looked at a probiotic supplement of O. formigenes haven't panned out. That bacteria doesn't live. I'm actually doing some consultant work with some researchers at the University of Alabama at Birmingham who are doing a lot of this gut bacteria studies, and they found that they can repopulate the gut with oformigenes, basically with this, but it's a one-time like paste apparently. So it's only available in research studies. So and they say there's not a lot of interest for a pharmaceutical company for a one-time pill. Like, why would they invest in the development of a one-time pill? I don't know if the world is that jaded. It probably is. I choose to have a more optimistic outlook, but so they
But
are able to do it, but with this paste that's only used in their studies, as far as I'm aware of. But I think so I don't think that taking a probiotic supplement is the way to go, at least right now, until we are able to have one that actually survives the stomach acid and gets down to your intestines where we really need it. Instead, I'd really recommend eating more fiber, right? Because we know every single bacteria like that, those bacteria live off of fiber. And so eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds, we're going to help support a healthy gut microbiome, which may be yet another reason why we see lower stones in people who eat a more plant-forward diet, like a Mediterranean or DASH style diet.
Would you say that a lot of people to lose weight cut carbs, and as a result, sometimes they have to cut fiber in that. So not paleo, the paleo diet, I guess, right? So that could lend itself though to making stones. Yes, is that what I'm hearing here? Make sure you get enough fiber if you are on a regimen to lose weight.
Yeah, the biggest concern, so a keto diet, and I'll call it a diet culture keto diet. So the way that most of us are doing a keto diet, not a true keto diet like would be prescribed for a child with epilepsy, is very high in protein. And that's actually probably the biggest concern about a keto diet. A study actually just came out, or paper just came out in AJKD, I think, a couple months ago, that showed that people who follow keto diets have about an 8 times higher risk of forming stones, keto or low carb.
Something to consider.
It's definitely something I've seen a lot of people. I don't know about you, Dr. Paul, who have formed stones because of a keto or low carb diet.
That's part of the general stone diet is low animal protein. Yeah, for sure. So you see these people that are, they're weightlifters, bodybuilders, and they're protein loading, especially with animal protein.
Yep.
Like cut that out. Plus, they tend to get more sodium in their diet too, which raises their urinary calcium. Yeah. So so it's kind of a double whammy.
Yeah. There's the protein, and also you're so restricted in fruit, obviously, like no fruit and only some vegetables. So there's citrate tends to tank as well, because you have such a high acid load from all that protein. Plus, you're not getting a lot of sources of dietary alkali. It tends to be higher in sodium, and obviously that protein. It's a perfect recipe for kidney stones.
Wow, we have learned so much today, and to be honest with you, I'm fascinated, and we could go on all night, all day, and keep talking. Yes, part 2, part 3, part 4. So folks, if somebody wanted to get hold of Melanie Betts, the kidney dietitian, how does one do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram at the Kidney Dietitian, and also Facebook and TikTok. I just posted my first TikTok today, so please go check me out there.
Well done.
I'm gonna try to hang out with the young kids on TikTok. And you can work with me. I have a course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School, that walks you through your 24-hour urine test and teaches you exactly how to change your diet for a targeted, effective stone prevention plan for you. But if you'd prefer to work more with Kidney Stone Dietitian one-to-one, I also have a team of dietitians who work with patients in a more traditional setting, and we would love to help you stop those stones.
That sounds great. And Dr. Paul, if someone wants to get a hold of you, how does one do that?
So at our website, kspfla.com. So please, if anyone is out there and they're a recurrent stone former, please reach out to one of the two of us. Because
There
there
is
are
hope.
things that can be done that you're not bound and determined to do that for the rest of your life. Most of the time, there's intervention that will, if not eliminate, certainly mitigate your risk for making stones.
I think we can say with all the years of education you two have and working experience, degrees, and all, I would say, you guys have to be one of the top 5, if not the top 2 experts in kidney stone
I
prevention.
don't know about top 2.
Come on. Well, yeah.
I have
Come
a
on.
passion for it for sure, Will. Yeah. But the other thing I was thinking of, Melanie, I don't know if you're familiar with Stanley Goldfarb at Penn, but he described a patient that had so vitamin D gets activated, Will, in our body. And so the active form it's hydroxylated twice. So it's 125 dihydroxy vitamin D. And so that's the active form that causes you to absorb calcium from the gut.
Is that good or bad to absorb calcium from the gut?
Well, that's what happens with these people with
question.
these low 25 vitamin D levels, and they're taking these extremely high doses of vitamin D, and so it won't ever raise their 25 vitamin D, but some of it gets converted to 125, and they're making stones.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
I had a patient with that last week, so yeah, so I'm working on that myself. There's a medicine that we use in CKD called Reality. So I'm seeing if that will raise the 25 vitamin D without raising the 125, and will normalize her excretion of calcium, which is high. So when she stopped the vitamin D, her 125 level, so upper limit of normal, I'm going by memory, is like 75, and hers was like 85. And now it's down to like 40. And her urine calcium came down from 505 milligrams down to 295 milligrams. So
is that good?
Driven process.
That's good.
Yeah, so you want to get
Much
below
improved.
300. You want to get below 300, maybe 250.
Okay, 300 is it. But the
So-
only way,
so-
find that out is you're going to have to work
but
with
get-
Melanie or Paul
Yes,
to
for
get
sure.
those numbers. Like I said, we've been talking. There's a lot of information on the net. You're hearing
Kind of
from
stuff.
family doctors, and urologists do a lot of great things, but they aren't experts. Most at least aren't, at kidney stone prevention like these.
Yeah,
two.
they're kidney stone intervention. If you're passing
Yes,
one, call
intervention.
your
It's important.
urologist.
Yeah, go see
But-
a urologist.
But
Yeah, we're
if
not
you want to
saying
keep from
that.
making more stones in the future, then
You got to do a lifestyle
us.
change.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. Evaluation, and then figure out what's the right approach for you. An individual approach. It's not one size fits all.
Well, to all our listeners here, we are happy to serve. This is the Crystal Clear Kidneys podcast with Dr. Paul Dreyer and, of course, Cheryl Belts and Betts. Sorry, not Belts, Betts. and she is the kidney dietitian. You can reach her at kidneydietitian.org.
Yep.
Yeah.
She's on Facebook. She's rocking out some TikTok vids now, so you can catch her on that. I don't know how you make a TikTok vid on that. It's like do you show hey, this is the new food that we have, or
Yeah.
got to keep it
I-
short, right?
They're very short. I'm just putting the same ones that I put on Instagram over there. So, if I'm making them, you might as well put them on another platform. So wish me luck tackling another platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish you the best of luck, Melanie. So
Thank you.
appreciate your
With
time.
these two, there is hope, and let's not make another one. So I'm talking stones. So thanks
Great.
so much, both you guys, and we will see you at the next show at the Crystal Clear Kidneys podcast. Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you for the listener for listening.